Hello, everyone. This is Cassandra Williamson coming to you live from up in the holler in Eastern Kentucky. Okay, this is breaking news. Hey, I wanted to get out here and just talk a little bit about what we saw today on the. I'm moving wires around here. For some reason, my remote mouse didn't work. Got on a little bit late. So, anyway, this morning's press briefing from the White House. Oh my gosh, Stephen Miller really laid it all out there as to what they really believe. And they spent probably 50 minutes talking about 40 or 50 minutes talking about nothing but, DEI, transgender people, women, men and women's sports, and all kinds of stuff like that. And I'm going to tell you, they blame everything in the world on trans people, on DEI people, and people who were hired, as they say, with DEI qualifications. But, anytime that was ever done, what happened was they've got a list of qualified, highly qualified people. If you end up with a couple of people who are have the same qualifications, well, they were trying to hire some of the minority populations. There's nothing wrong with doing that, if that's your policy or whatever, as long as you've got the best highly qualified people in there. And that's the first criteria that you're using. But the very first thing he had to talk about was the airline crashes. He's talking about, let me back up. He's actually talking about the first 100 days of Trump's administration. This is a celebration, essentially, from the White House in the press room from Stephen Miller about what's going on in the past 100 days. And he spent the whole time talking about all of these things that he calls the woke ideology and gender ideology and all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to tell you, I'm not an ideology. I don't know why people think that that's appropriate. I am me. That's all there is to it. I am just me. The very first thing he talked about in this celebration of Trump's 100 days was the airline crashes, and that there were women flying those planes or sitting there in control towers or whatever. Really? Man, your animus is coming in for, for women and minorities. It just stands out like a sore thumb. But that's what they talked about. He talked about that as if that were the reason for those plane crashes. He wants you to get that connection. That's what he wants you to do, is to think that that's the case. And that was not the case in either situation, in any of those situations. Okay. So the next thing he goes after in the next paragraph would be hiring across the whole federal government. How President Trump has stopped all of the hiring that's based on race and sex and stuff like that. So, he's going after all of these things. He's blaming, basically what he wants you to think is that the problems that are arising in our society because there's some lax security here or some problem over here. And yes, there's problems with people being killed and all that kind of stuff, and absolutely horrendous. But it's not because of DEI hires. It's not because of anything like that. But yet we have people who, like Miller, I call him Goebbels, who seem to want you to think that these problems that we have are because of DEI or gender ideology or something like that, or wokeism, as he calls it. And I hate that word. He wants you to think that. He wants you to believe that that's the case. But it's not the case. He mentioned how President Trump has gone after defining men and women, as the biological attributes and all of that. And then he goes after, talks about removing all of the studies from those that were done under the Biden administration that have to do with trans people and gender ideology and, LGBT people and minority populations. And he calls all of those studies basically irrelevant. The people who were doing them, crazy. And the studies were insufficient. But those were some really good studies that supported the work that was being done in support of our trans people. And NIH has removed them. The Health and Human Services, the whole department under Kennedy, has gone through and removed all the research that was done and it was done academically and done soundly, and it was peer reviewed. But they want you to be able to go out to the Onion and get it. If it wasn't published in the Onion, that's me being satirical, okay? If it wasn't published in the Onion, they don't want it. Basically, that's what I'm calling everything that they're doing is satire. It's like, yeah. So they went after all of those things, all those really good studies that had lots of reputable people working on them and whose work was peer reviewed. They're going after all that, removing all of those things. And Stephen Miller was excited about it. Excited about that. Goebbels is all he is a propaganda machine, a chief propagandist for the White House. That's what I'm calling him. All right. If you saw the email I sent out, I had a kind of a blended image there of Goebbels and Miller, and they don't look too much different. but anyway, that's what we're dealing with, folks, is this. And let me see. Let me go on down through here. Department of Justice is working to make clear that the administration is going to fully enforce Title 6, 7, and 9. They're going after colleges and administrations, college administrations and universities across the country and businesses, large and small. If you have anything to do with any of these so-called woke things that they despise, that he actually is, I think he's got something on for that. But he's going after all of those things, denigrating the people who were properly vetted and checked and all of that for the positions that they hold. But yes, there are some things going on in our universities that are wrong, but it's not the place of the federal government to tell these universities to limit their research, to limit or restrict or refrain from hiring people with diverse backgrounds. Wasn't that really excuse me, wasn't that really what they were all about from the very beginning, was wanting to have diverse opinions, diverse viewpoint diversity? That's the phrase I'm looking for. Viewpoint diversity going across all of these things through educational institutions, through the military, through government, through policy making, through research, all of this viewpoint diversity. We heard it left and right. But no, they don't really want that. What Stephen Miller is telling you he wants to do is only if it's approved by them. I'm going to tell you, that is as close to what has happened in strong authoritarian regimes all across this country in the past and the present. Next thing he went after, let me see, looking university system, civil rights laws. Yeah, men and women's sports. Now I'm going to tell you, the science does not support their exclusion. However, the narrative has been taken over by the right for years and years now. And we don't need Leah Thomas out there doing this selfishly, going after some title over a biological woman. And I'm talking about genetic woman, okay, in that sense. Leah has every right to live and exist as herself as she wants. There's no problem with that. But it becomes a selfish thing whenever you decide to take a title that you gained because you went through male puberty. But you wanted to do it. So Leah is wrong in doing all of that. She failed to think about the larger population. Miller, in his statements today, didn't mention Leah Thomas directly, didn't mention people like Rose Montoya or Dylan Mulvaney, anything like that, didn't mention any of these people, but went after them because they're the ones who are actually making a big public think about everything. That's really what it all amounts to. So Stephen Miller's little diatribe today, while he was behind the lectern at the White House press briefing, spent the whole time attacking all this wokeism that they have defined. And all that time, that's all they wanted to talk about for the first 100-day accomplishments of President Trump. And those are definitely not laudable accomplishments. They're not praiseworthy. They attack minority populations. Everything they've done is attack these people, and they've got people who believe that this is all right and all good and that they're doing the right thing in support of, viewpoint diversity and increasing the, meritocracy and sticking to merit only type decision making and hiring and all of that. Well, it never works out in the end. This administration has made a point of removing professionals and closing down viewpoints that they disagree with. That's been their modus operandi all along. But they didn't come by this just, last week or even 3 years ago with Project 2025's policy document. No, they didn't come. This is not something new. They have been after LGBTQ plus people, and however the words were described over time, since the 50s, late 40s and 50s. Back in the 50s, the Lavender Scare. And then the religious right got a hold of it, and they added in phrase in 47 into the Christian Bible that wasn't there before about homosexuality. It wasn't in there before that. They made it up. They put it in there and said, that's what he was talking about. Paul was talking about. No, he wasn't talking about that. Go look it up for yourself. Okay. But this is not new. This is just a culmination of many, many years of planning and strategizing and keeping the message on focus. And that's what's happened here. We have allowed other people to dictate the narrative into the mainstream, into the public consciousness, from people like the chief propagandist in the White House right now, Stephen Miller. So what are you going to do? What's the path forward? Well, Lord, I'm still trying to figure it out. But I can tell you this, that the best thing you need to be doing is preparing for the worst. Okay? If you can imagine the worst case scenario, you need to be preparing for it and not waiting until someone tells you that, oh, look, you can't do that now. Or we found you. There you are. We're coming to get you. Yeah, because what they really want to do, they want to put all of the LGBT people in electroshock therapy, like they did in the 50s, like they did with Alan Turing, the inventor of AI, basically, the computers. So they are really working hard to do that. They want to rebuild these institutions so we can get rid of all of these people in the country, the LGBT people, and particularly those diabolical trans people. Stick them in some institution somewhere. And if they can find your name, if they can find who you are, they will attempt to round you up and put you away because they just don't like you, okay? Their viewpoint diversity ends at your existence, at your life. Their acceptance of viewpoint diversity ends with trans people. It ends with gender as opposed to sex. It ends with all of those things they don't like. So what they're doing, and on top of that, they're trying to control the narrative, control the language that you use, control the science that you have access to. They're trying to do all of those things so that you cannot do anything to look at, investigate, study, care for, or tend to the needs of trans people, primarily in the country, minorities overall, including LGBT people. But this is something that's going to affect every American in this country, one way or another. If they aren't coming after you right now, what's that old saying, the old adage? If they aren't coming after you right now, well, just wait. Your time will come, and then it'll be too late because you will not have stood up for those who were gone before you. That's the way it looks at this point in time. So Stephen Miller over here is calling any of this stuff that has to do with gender and trans and all of that kind of stuff as child abuse. And what they're doing is they're stirring up the population against child abuse, which is absolutely wrong and horrendous. And we should not be out here reading to children in schools as drag queens. That's the furthest thing you need to be doing. You should not be doing that. If you are, and you're making plans to do it, Laura, lo and behold, I'm going to call you out on it. I'll be putting a big bullseye right there on top of your head and said, this is one of those people doing the crazy shit in our own community. You got to stop it. We bring it upon ourselves most of the time because we're out here doing crazy stuff and no one is stopping them. No one is standing up to them. And what's happening is, and I've seen this so many times, the gatekeepers within our own community feel as if they want to control the narrative here and bring no light to the wrongs we're doing, our community's doing. That's wrong. We need to be the ones promoting viewpoint diversity. Bring in the people. We should be the example that says we're bringing in people who disagree with us, violently even disagree with us. Bring them in and set them down and let them know what's going on. Tell them, look, I want your opinions on this. I want you to have a say in what's going on. And in the end, you will have a much more sustainable program or path forward than anything you could think of. You do not exclude people because they disagree with you. As a matter of fact, those are the ones you want to bring in and have that conversation with. When you exclude them, you're creating a silo and you're creating an echo chamber mentality that's self-reinforcing. And before long, you have people running around in dog masks at pride parades, on leashes, walking on their hands and knees through a pride parade or at a pride event. Yeah, and some of you say, no, that's never happened. Yes, it has happened. I've been there. I've seen it. You just don't have I've been to stuff all across this country. I've seen some crap out there, okay? A lot of good people, but some of the stuff is just downright silly and morally reprehensible. So we clean our own house and we keep Stephen Miller off of us. But Stephen Miller has already created this narrative that is not going to stop. It's not going to let up simply because we go after fixing our own house. It's too late for that. We're going to be doing the next 4 years, at least the next 1.5, in defense mode, protecting ourselves, protecting our families and the well-being of those around us. And that's what you need to be doing. Be prepared. It's going to get rough. It hasn't stopped yet. So with that, I want to close it out and say thank you for attending the breaking news story. Stephen Miller, the chief propagandist of the White House. That's him. See you at 6 this evening with more coverage. So I can get which one of these